afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Firstly, I can see that most of you have actually turned off your cameras and muted your microphones, but if you haven't already, please do so. And we're expecting quite a lot of people today, so it will help us conserve bandwidth. I'm Sarah Davidson, and I'm the Member Services Coordinator at CAVAL in Melbourne, Victoria. I'm very happy to introduce Ange Jenkins to you today, who will say a few words of welcome and introduction. Ange is Coordinator Library Frontline Services at Federation University. She's also the chair of CAVAL Customer Services and Collaboration Network, CSCN. Thank you, Ange.
Thanks, Sarah. On behalf of CAVAL and the CSCN, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia and New Zealand where we live, learn and work. We acknowledge and celebrate the inherent strengths of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, sky and culture. We also acknowledge the people of these lands maintain knowledge through oral tradition practiced for generations. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome you now to the third and final Community of Practice event in CSCN's online series, Frontline Stories from a Pandemic. Usually our Communities of Practice events are face-to-face affairs with a small audience, but we're very happy this year to be offering these sessions to a larger audience in both Australia and New Zealand. Webinar etiquettes and further information about this session can be found through clicking on the links provided at the top of the chat. If you have any technical questions during the presentation, please type your question into the chat and the CAVAL team will assist you. This session will start off with a presentation which is followed by a facilitated Q&A. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat and our facilitator will ask them in the Q&A segment. If you can place a Q before a question, this will assist the facilitator to distinguish between questions and comments. Thank you. Our facilitator today is Carl Smith, and Carl is the Supervisor of Ballarat and Wimmera campuses Library Frontline Services at Federation University Library. Thank you, Carl. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Angela Kopelis. Angela is from RMIT University Library, where she is Advisor, Frontline Services Education Portfolio. Angela is going to share with us her presentation about the implementation of the Click and Collect service at RMIT. Thanks so much, Angela. Over to you.
Thanks, Ange. Just bear with me while I share my screen.
Sure.
Oops, and I'll just, what happened to my, I get the feeling of just, sorry about that. Just a few little, can anyone see that? Hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep, that's great, thanks.
So thank you for that. Now, just to, so what I'm going to talk about is just one of the initiatives that we sort of implemented at RMIT and just sort of some of the process and what we found. So I'll share that with you. Hopefully that's working. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, RMIT Library is closed on the 23rd of March. So we were sort of leading up to it just a couple of weeks before, so we closed all our campuses and we didn't go back. So we're still all working from home. So we obviously ran our library service via our live chat service. So we had our service running obviously from 9 o'clock in the morning till 8:30 at night, and then weekends as well. And then obviously had all our library workshops online. From that, we decided that when we wanted to offer something else to our students. So we decided on a click and collect service. At the time, we were sort of thinking we were going to open it up to everyone, and then talking through some of the schools and getting a little bit of, I guess, questions about it from some of our research students. It sort of became, the idea sort of generated, and it kind of became that we were only going to offer it to our HDR students, which fell in line with RMIT's kind of return to work or return to campus type transition. So it just became, the idea was very simple, that we were just going to offer our click and collect once we went through all our operational procedures and put in submissions and things, that we're going to only offer it to our HDR students, which was a small group that we could control. So the planning of this was to sort of, it was amazing how a simple idea of click and collect became quite a kind of more of an involved process than we probably thought, where we had to put a number of proposals and submissions to a number of committees for approval. And obviously there was a number of different drafts of it, and also sort of backwards and forwards for a little while, because we had to really follow, obviously, government guidelines, as well as RMIT processes, and we had to sort of have everything sort of, all our T's crossed and dots, all our I's dotted and stuff, because of the fact that it was quite important. We had to get all our COVID plans in order and all that sort of stuff. So it was quite an involved process, but once we got through that, it became some planning for library. So we had to have a whole group of people involved. So it became not only just the library staff, but there was property service staff, security, and other groups involved as well. So property services sort of took on things like they had to put markings on floors, make sure that there was entry points and exit points, that kind of thing. And then as well as having other processes in place for how we would deal with staff or students coming on campus and that kind of thing. There was also planning from the library. So, for example, we had to get quite a number of different groups involved. So things like our library systems people had to do a lot of pre-work before that, because obviously with holds, we had to sort of limit it to a particular group, which our library system at the moment would have been open to all groups. So they had to create a new user group as a HDR group to be able to then apply hold policies and other policies as well as that. We also had to do things like ensure that anyone that came to our library catalogue were not able to see the holds. So the only people that could place holds would be HDR students. We also had to separate the collection to make sure that anything that was on loan couldn't be placed on hold, because we couldn't return anything, there would be no process to get those books back to then fulfill a hold. So there was quite a lot of sort of system type things that we had to put in place. Obviously, we had to follow a COVID safe plan and government guidelines. We had to also put in operational procedures, so things like what do the team members do on the day, we had to separate the tasks. So it'd be like team member A would be doing A, B, and C, team member B doing C, D, and E. All staff that were involved would have to do an online module, so they couldn't go on campus unless there was an online module that was followed through. And then obviously when they entered on campus, there was things like temperature checks and wristbands. And wristbands was something that were given to staff once they got temperature checked and were okay to proceed. And then the following day or the next time they were on campus, there was a different colour wristband. So as I said, we had our click and collect service to our higher degree students by research. We also didn't offer it at all campuses. We limited it to our Bundoora and Swanston campus. And we also had 20 staff rostered, which was like in teams of 2. So our teams of 2, so we had limited campuses. We also had limited days. For example, at Bundoora, we were there 5 days a week. At Swanston, we were there for 3 days a week. And our teams of, we had to have teams of 2, and they had to be the same team throughout the whole process. So for example, if team 1 on Monday couldn't make it, we couldn't split the teams up and have one person join another group. So that was sort of part of the OHS sort of guidelines that we had to follow. So it had to be the team. We could move the team around, but we couldn't split the groups up and have, team 1 join team 2 or something like that. So unless it was something like a really like emergency situation. So we had a lot of sort of things we had to follow to the T kind of thing. So we went live on the 13th of July and it went for about 3 or 4 weeks. Students couldn't just rock up on campus. It had to be by appointment only. So we had to use our web services people had to kind of create a way that we could take bookings. So we used the bookings app on the Microsoft applications. So all students would get an email to tell them that their hold had arrived or was available or was fulfilled, and it would send them a link to a booking. So then they would then choose a time slot that had been pre-organised, and so then they would slot themselves in and they could then turn up. So they had 20 minutes, so they could only be on campus for 20 minutes. So the appointments were limited. So we started our service from about 10 o'clock in the morning, gave staff an hour to prepare things, and then the actual service opened from 11 to 1 p.m. So the time slots were sort of spread out in that time in 20-minute slots. So we could have up to 10 students in each slot, but it was fairly limited in what students, if they missed an appointment, they had to make another appointment, so they couldn't turn up just unannounced. The other thing that we were restricted with was that while library staff were in the library space preparing pick lists and that type of thing, we couldn't actually have students in the library. So this actually ran at Swanston anyway, it ran from like a multi-purpose room, whereas Bundoora was deemed a bit more easily controlled, so they were running from the library. But at Swanston, we had to run it through like a multi-purpose room. So that kind of went okay. It was going really well. Staff, you know, were sort of really got into it. The other thing with staff was it was a combination and a team approach from different areas. So we had people from the Frontline Services team, we had people from collections, we had people from our infrastructure teams, and it was on a volunteer basis, so we didn't make anyone sort of participate. We had about 20 people that sort of volunteered, and then we sort of split them up into groups, and they all got allocated a day and a partner. So that worked really well for staff. A lot of the staff that volunteered wanted to kind of get out from working from home. They were really eager to come back on campus. And so we ended up, that worked really well, and it worked well for about the 4 weeks. And then what happened was we got stage 4 restrictions, and then we had another sort of, I guess, restriction on us ourselves, and we couldn't continue on with the click and collect service. So we quickly came together and sort of adapted that and came up with a click and post service. So we rebadged the service, and we called it a click and post. We still only applied this to our HDR students. Obviously, we had to resubmit our proposal. Luckily, this was a quicker process and got approved really quickly. Although we had to have a little bit of time to get things like work permits sort of worked through, and get staff to be able to have work permits, because of the fact that they wouldn't be able to then be, you know, moving around Melbourne and all that kind of thing. So then we had things like face masks, and then we got things like temperature checks. That was the daily exercise that we had to go through. The service didn't change much when it became a click and collect, click and post service. The only sort of differences that we had was that we had a reduced number of staff. So the restrictions placed on us was that we had to kind of reduce the number of people coming on campus and working. So once they got their work permit, we had a team of 8, and we reduced the service from, say, 3 or 5 days a week to now twice a week. And that's still in place at the moment. So we roughly have a couple of staff at our Bundoora campus, and then a couple of staff at our Swanston campus, and they then just post items out to students who book. And the one really great feature that we've had with our library system was that rather than sort of, because we had the problem of how do we know if students are actually at their current address or what's on our library systems. So our library systems people were able to turn on a feature that allowed students to add their current address. As soon as they tried to put in a hold, it wouldn't allow the hold to proceed unless they put in their current address. So students would put in their current address. That would actually appear on the hold slip. So then staff could be assured that it was going to the right place, and we've been able to successfully sort of post our items to students without any hiccups, although we have had a few hiccups with the fact that Australia Post is a bit delayed at the moment, so packages are arriving a little bit later than expected, but generally it's working really well. And my last, and I guess sort of coming to an end, where to next? Obviously with restrictions easing in the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to go to click and collect, back to click and collect, and we're sort of aiming to open this up to another cohort. So, and we're thinking that we might be opening it up to academics. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. That was fantastic. There are quite a few questions in. There are some questions in the chat there.
Sure.
So the first one we've got is from Bridget. Just in relation to the booking app, was this for contact tracing?
And yeah, it did work for contact tracing as well. So yes, while all students had to appear at security, and there was obviously some kind of contact tracing, we also had it as a contact tracing. So we'd print out the booking sheet, and students could either sign in or we'd tick them off to make sure that they entered yes. But yes, generally yes, it was.
Oh, sorry, I was it's Bridget here. I was referring to the teams of two. So was that?
Oh, sorry, I'm not reading the question.
That's okay. No, I didn't write it fully down. So sorry.
So, as far as the team of two, that was sort of based on the OH&S committee sort of not wanting too many people on campus and a mix of groups. So they didn't really want, say for example, if the Monday crew happened to get COVID, for example, or was not feeling well, they didn't want that Monday person to be partnered up with the Wednesday person. So yeah, so in the end, it was mainly to maintain the small exposure, like the risk factor, and then if there was a problem with COVID and stuff like that, that we could easily go right. It's only these two; they haven't mixed with anyone else, and we could, easily kind of contact trace.
Thank you.
That's great. The next question's from Ange. What communication tips and tricks could you share that helps you in your pre-planning stage for click and collect?
Oh, the communication. Well, that was a great one because we really had to target, because we didn't, even though it got out before, but we targeted only the HDR groups through their newsletters and their own communication tools. Obviously that kind of came out through, word got out, and so other students were chatting to us about, oh, can we also come along and get click and collect, or, I'm a master's by coursework, so can I do whatever? But I guess the good communication was that we updated all the staff, so we had sort of some canned responses to how to reply to students, so that way it's not just going through one person. We did put it on our webpage, but yeah, the communication would be to kind of make sure that all parties know, and that that everyone's sort of up to speed. We also had an FAQ for staff as well, so then they could refer back to that if there was a question that they were getting constantly on chat. And I hope that answered the question, but so yeah, it was that making sure that the right parties know, and that there are some sort of kind of general kind of questions that can be answered quite quickly.
Fantastic. The next one we've got here is from Sarah. Was it a difficult decision to rebadge the service once stage 4 restrictions were in place?
No, that was actually the quickest, I think, decision really. I think that was, like we'd started the process before we got approval in July to sort of do a click and collect, and then it just seemed like a no-brainer when we kind of were nearing, well, we kind of got the stage 4 restrictions, that it was quite just simple to say, how about we just do a click and post and away we go. And we'd sort of done that with honouring some of the click and collect that couldn't get picked up by students. We sent that out on the day that we were sort of stopped from going into campus, but then it was like, well, we could continue this. This is quite simple to do. And the proposal to allow us to do that wasn't a long, winded out sort of process. So we could just go, right, yep, right, let's go, get some envelopes and we're ready to go kind of thing, with some minor adjustments to our library system. So no, that was a really quick decision, quite quick, easy turnaround.
That's good to hear. Another question from Emeka. Who conducted the temperature checks?
That was security. So everyone had to check in with security before that they came on campus. So there was a lot of work done about, you know, how you entered the building, how you exited the building. So as I mentioned, we weren't even allowed to be in the library. So everyone had to turn up at security. They would get temperature checked, and then they'd get a wristband. So students or staff would get a wristband.
Very good. Another one from Emeka as well. Did you notice that you received more requests with click and collect or click and post?
That's a good question, because when we started the click and collect, I thought, oh great, and I think a lot of us did, it was going to be really popular. And then when we turned it into a click and post, we actually thought that would be like we'd notice a significant difference. And I've actually noticed that it's pretty much on par. We've been running click and post now probably a little bit longer, but it's quite on the same sort of par. We don't seem, we've obviously we've had more sort of requests now with click and post, but I think that's more because of the fact that we've turned it in from a click and collect to a click and post. But no, it seems to be a similar kind of, our stats are showing the similar kind of, they're on par. So neither or other, either or.
There we go. Another question from Mesa, and they would like to know more about the logistical arrangement during click and collect. So how were the requests shelved in the multipurpose room? How did you track and manage the entry of the patrons who booked to come and collect their items as well?
Okay, so with the logistics of it, as I said, we weren't allowed to be in the library space, so we couldn't have students in the library, but we had to take sort of our collection of books downstairs into our multi-purpose room. So it was a bit of a logistical thing of going down with a trolley and putting it in a room. We set it up, we didn't have shelves, we just had tables that we set it up with alphabetical order with their names and things. We also, and initially we would check the items out to students before we ended up taking a self-check machine down into the multi-purpose room, so then students can do it themselves. But initially we would do it. They just came in, collected their books and went. And through the fact that their appointments were there and only 10 people could come in at a time, we were able to manage that sort of process, that there wasn't too many people in at the space and all that sort of stuff. And there was staff at the front. They would then allow students in. We would sign them in so we knew who was coming in the space. If people hadn't turned up, we knew that they didn't turn up. They didn't collect their items. The idea around the logistics of it was there was things like signs on the floor, which way to walk, which how to get out, that sort of stuff. We didn't have to do any of that. That was property services. We then had to make sure that we cleaned up all our surfaces and whatever we touched, and staff had to social distance and all that sort of stuff, but it was manageable with the two in a space at any given time.
Very good. Plenty more questions here. Tamara wants to ask, what library system do you use?
We use Alma.
Nice and short and sharp there. I've got another question from Ange. What was the feedback from students about the service?
The students really loved it. It was really good that we were getting some feedback that they were really appreciative of the fact that they could still continue to study. One of the reasons with the HDR students that we chose that was that obviously that they do their research. Some of them do some really, intricate sort of research where not necessarily everything's available in e-resource, so they needed that physical book. So they were really appreciative that they could sort of continue on with their research, and the fact that we were able to have a click and collect was great. So they were really appreciative of that, and we were like, oh, it's just been so great that we can. And obviously the downside of that is that we couldn't open it to everyone, and that there's like, oh, but why can't we, and why is only a certain cohort able to, and surely we could open it up, but we were restricted. But no, the students have been really positive. I don't think we've had any sort of bad feedback about it. It's been all fantastic. We appreciate that we've been so caring, that you're, and the same with the sort of click and post. It's turned into like, it's so nice to know that just because the library isn't open, that you can still connect with us, and we can still kind of send us things, or allow us to come and collect things. So no, it's all been very positive and very appreciative that we care and that we're helping them with their studies.
That's wonderful. And just a related question to that too from Joe.
Sure.
How did RMIT undergraduate students, so how did RMIT support undergrad students who were not able to be part of the service?
Yeah, unfortunately we weren't able to open it to undergraduates. So the only sort of service we had was our chat service. So all our sort of, research and stuff, or any other just questions about whether it's finding books, any service related questions is done through our chat. And obviously through our library workshops, and obviously that sort of enabled a further enhancement of our service. But I think with RMIT, we have our chat service is from 9 o'clock in the morning till 8:30 at night. And we also have a weekend service from 10 o'clock to 4:30. So we had a wide span of hours that students could still approach us. And we also, through the chat, we also had a ticket system for our academic skills advisors and our peer mentors. So they were still able to get access to peer mentors or academic service people, as well as librarians at pretty much any time. I mean, obviously the chat was more real time, but the tickets worked really well as well, and they were still able to get some support with, creating, writing up an essay or that type of stuff, referencing, all that kind of thing that they might not be so easy to do over chat, but they were certainly able to get help with it.
Thanks for that. We've also got another one from Tamara. Beyond COVID, do you think you will continue with the click and collect service?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I have thought about that myself, thinking, I wonder if there's a place for it. I don't know. I know we're probably going to go back to click and collect as restrictions are eased from October. So we're definitely going to be doing that kind of thing. But as far as 3 months' time, I'm not sure. But that is a good question to take back.
It's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
That's it. Another question from Joe. Is the feature on your system to prompt students for their current address on their hold request still in place?
Yes, so that came in place. That was actually, I thought that was a really cool, nifty little trick that Alma had, because we were sort of thinking, we're going to have to ring people and sort of say, hey, is this your current address? Because what happened was, when we sort of shut down the service for click and collect, I spent the next day ringing people saying, unfortunately, we've had to stop our service, and you're not going to be able to come in and pick up your requests and stuff that had already been booked in. And so it was quite interesting, because at the time I was ringing, we didn't know about we were going to post things out. And so then we realised there was a couple of students that I emailed and I said, do you have my current address? Do you know if is this the right route? And they were like, I've actually moved, or I'm not staying where I've kind of got on the system, sort of thing. So when we thought, great, we're going to have to keep ringing people up and saying, hey, is this your current address? So there'd be a delay. So when we spoke to our library systems people, they were like, I think there's a feature that we can actually kind of, tick on. And so it was really good. So it sort of appears when they try and put a hold, unless they put in their address, it will not put the hold on. So that was really good. So you could sort of see, and on the pick list, you can see all these addresses in the sort of notes field saying, this is my address. And, obviously there was multiple people using the service and, the same address popping up. But so that was the really good. I actually thought that was the best feature of the whole system. But yeah, it was good. And it's still in place, and who knows, it might have a future use for something.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Save time.
That's it. I've got another one here from Emeka as well. Were you still posting interlibrary loan books to HER students?
No, we didn't. We stopped the interlibrary loans because obviously in some instances a lot of other libraries were closed too, so we couldn't actually get some of that stuff. We did sort of, if we could get some, we would aim to try and get stuff in e-copy or something like that if we were able to, but not so much the books. So we haven't really turned on document delivery. We have sort of snuck in a few things like, with now the fact that we've got some people on campus, we do a little bit of digitization with some of that requests, if it's like a chapter or something like that. So we are sneaking a few of those little things now into that. But yeah, no, we haven't posted any interlibrary loans.
Very good. Were patrons allowed to request if they had pre-existing fines?
Oh, that's a good one. I suspect that we deleted all fines from that. So no, yeah, everyone was able to put, we didn't have any limits, whether there was fines or we had a few that sort of reached the threshold, the borrowing threshold, and we just overrid it. So we didn't really stop people from having, whether they had fines or whether they had, you know, our limit's 50 items. So if they had 50 and they were putting holds, we were sort of overriding it. And the reason because of that is because we haven't been able to return any books. So at the moment, all our students are keeping books. We've got no mechanism for returning. We're not, at the moment, we're working on another proposal to get our books returned on campus. So because they can't do any of that, we've sort of said, look, it's, if you've got 50 books and you've won another hold or two, we'll let you have it.
Very good. Thanks for that.
So
I've
much.
just noted the time.
Yeah, thanks, Angela and Carl. It's
right.
a great discussion, and I know we would really like to keep it going, but unfortunately we are at time. So I will just mention the people who didn't get their question answered, or if you'd like further information, if you email members@caval.edu.au and you'll be provided with Angela's contact details.
Yes, yeah, definitely happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Angela. So just to wrap up, thanks so much, Angela, for that presentation. It was fascinating, obviously lots of interest, and thanks, Carl, for facilitating. And thanks to everyone who asked questions and attended today and made it such an engaging session. So I'd also like to mention that as a small token of thanks to the speakers and facilitator in this webinar, CSCN and Caval have arranged for native trees to be planted by a community group through the organisation 15 Trees. And this year a lot of their trees will be planted in areas affected by the bushfires earlier in 2020. So please let us know what you thought of this webinar by filling out the online survey, which will be sent to you shortly. This will assist CSCN in improving future events and webinars. I'd also like to thank Sarah for her fantastic work in organising today, and just a final thank you to all of our presenters and facilitators, as this was the third in a series of events. And thank you all again for attending today and the previous sessions, and we look forward to seeing you all again at our future events. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.